Thank you for tuning back in to part two of our Meet the Ambassador with Anna Hopkin. Let's get straight back into things and pick up the conversation where we left off. I mean, you mentioned obviously before about training out in the States. What sort of differences did you find from training in the States as opposed to the UK? And is there one that you more so prefer?
I think it's quite different in the States because you're almost in this like bubble of I was just swimming, like sort of ate with all my teammates, trained with all my teammates, hung out with them at the weekends. Like that was just my life, was swimming and my teammates, which I never really had so much in the UK because I was part of university. I had sort of separate friends to swimming, and it just wasn't always about swimming. But I think I was finally in a position when I went to the US where I was ready for my life to just revolve around swimming, and I think that really kind of helped me like in everything really, like training, recovery, nutrition, just everything was geared towards performing well. And I think in the States, I guess one of the main differences is there's just so many more opportunities to compete with the college system, because they do dual meets like every couple of weeks, and then they have sort of competitions where they suit up and really go for like best times and things. And then like NCAAs, I was racing against sort of one of the best American sprinters that they have that I would never get to compete against in the UK. So it allowed me to race against people that I would usually only get to race against at like Worlds or Olympics. So it does make you up your game a lot. And I think, yeah, I guess the training was quite different. Like I was much more sprint orientated to the point where each session just had like a very specific sprint focus, which was slightly different to something I'd done in the UK. And I've kind of brought that back into my training here. We've kind of gone for a bit of a hybrid with stuff I did out in the US and then new things that have been brought in my new training program. So it's been good really to kind of experience new ways of training and then create something that works well for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just going to ask the next question, which has led on really nicely to that, is I think when we first got introduced and held a conversation about obviously you joining the team with Nutrition X, was you'd really just burst onto the scene, setting some pretty impressive times in, I think it was 50 and 100 meters freestyle potentially, but they were really quick sprint times. So what was it that you think happened over there in the States that allowed you to improve that? Because again, from not many people, I'm sure, knowing that much about swimming in terms of the finer details of it, that you can always practice how quickly you can run, or you can try and increase your speed by doing hill sprints or whatever it may be in that sense. But how do you then combat that, or how do you sort of try and target that when you're swimming?
I think it's quite strange really, because almost as soon as I went out to the US, like I just improved instantly. So I don't know if it was a combination of the fact that my life was now just swimming. I was obviously still studying, but it was much easier to kind of do alongside it. Like in 2018, which was my final year at Bath, I had my dissertation, I qualified for the Commonwealth Games, I was studying full time and fitting in swimming. So I don't know if it was just like the whole lifestyle aspect completely changed when I went to the US, and I had a lot more time. My recovery was better. I wasn't going out with friends much because the entire team was just that they are your friends. And so, we were all swimmers, which in the UK, like some of my friends at university, they're not athletes. And so it's just a different way of life. But then also, I think the training was very technical. Like I had a lot of, I've always been fast, but my stroke hasn't always been the most, I don't want to say pretty because that doesn't always matter, but I mean, it was a little bit sort of splashy and slappy on the water. And so we worked a lot with kind of making my stroke more efficient and lengthening it out. And I'm very small for a sprinter, so the more kind of length I can get through my stroke, the better really, to kind of compensate for that. So there was a lot of technical work we did, as well as we do a lot of work on like cords and bungees. You kind of sprinting out against a resistance, which improves your kind of power and catch under the water. So a lot of it was technical, but there was kind of a lot of aspects that I'd never done before that I think just kind of helped a lot.
Yeah, and then if we move on to sort of the swimming and nutrition side of things, then we know obviously you're largely pescatarian. How much has that had an impact on your strategy within swimming, but your performance as well?
It's actually a relatively new thing since I've been pescatarian. It wasn't actually until I came back to the UK in March that I decided I wanted to go sort of. I predominantly eat vegetarian, but I kind of have fish now and again. But I've probably always eaten largely vegetarian. Like my mum's always been vegetarian. A few of my friends at uni were vegetarian, and we all cooked together and we lived together. So it was just kind of easier, and I never really missed having meat. But then when I went out to the US, it was actually very difficult to be vegetarian out there. It was very difficult to find any protein alternatives, and so I just found myself eating more meat than I had back home, which I don't know, it just kind of like gave me a mental shift. Like I just kind of like the consumption and waste and like the fact that I didn't really have a choice. Like I had to eat meat because if I didn't, I wouldn't kind of get my like protein intake and whatever. So because we ate in a nutrition center, so it's kind of all buffet style and provided to you. So like there just wasn't really anything available for kind of vegetarians. And so when I came back, I was just like, the fact that I didn't have the choice out there, I kind of want to make the choice now that I'm back. And I don't really miss meat at all, and like there's so many alternatives now. It's so easy, and I almost prefer being a bit more creative with cooking and making meals that I actually put more effort into. So yeah, it's been quite easy for me, really. I don't think it like has made too much difference to kind of my preparation or kind of training.
Yeah, and what are the most sort of important nutritional considerations that you've got to make, and do they change between training and game? I know obviously within other sports that there'll be carb loading, but obviously within sprinting, maybe that's not as important for you.
Yeah, I guess probably from training to competition, there's not a major change really. I guess because I'm training so much, it's more important to get enough energy in really, and for each session. Sometimes timings of eating is quite important, like because we train quite early, it's quite hard to get a lot of food in before we train, because it is so early, and you also don't want to eat right before you swim because you know your stomach doesn't really like that. So
Yeah.
it's kind of getting a balance of like eating a little snack before and then making sure you kind of refuel straight away after and have like a decent meal. But obviously, you know, I always tend to stick to that and make sure I have my protein and my carbs and my veg. And if I've got each of them in a meal, then I know I'm pretty much on track. I think you can kind of put too much thought into it. As long as you have a source of protein in your meal, you're probably going to be hitting your protein targets for the day. So I don't kind of overthink it, but I am mindful about making sure I've kind of got all aspects of like dietary requirements, whatever.
Yeah, and any sort of go-to energy snacks, does that sort of encompass the understanding of trying new things and being creative? Obviously, with the choice of being vegetarian as an example, have you got any sort of things that are your go-to?
I always have like, I think rice cakes with like peanut butter are so good. I always have like yogurt and granola. Um, I eat a lot of fruit. Smoothies. I'll often do like if I don't think I've like had enough protein in a day, I just put like a scoop of protein powder in with some like mixed berries and yogurt and make a smoothie out of it, and that's super easy. So I'm kind of like just have a general awareness of how much protein I think I've had throughout the day, and if I know I'm like low or whatever, it's so easy just to like make a protein shake or a protein smoothie or something. So they're
Yeah.
usually my go-to snacks, I guess.
Yeah, and you know, obviously from the conversation that we had right at the start of our relationship, how important female sport is to us at Nutrition X. Obviously highlighted with our partnership with the WSA, and the female ambassadors that we've got on board, and how much we look to promote female sport. It can be a bit of a stickling point though, obviously with the certain sports being potentially more male dominated and whatnot. Have you found that in swimming at all? Has there been sort of any, not issues as such, but hurdles that you feel as though you've sort of had to overcome because you're a female in that sport?
I think with swimming, it's quite good in that males and females are quite equally represented because we compete, obviously not against each other, but we compete together. So like at a world champs, you'll have a male event, then a female event, then a male event. So we get kind of equal exposure and equal representation. There's not a separate male worlds and female worlds. We're all kind of together. So I guess that's different to some sports. We get equal exposure, but there's definitely a lack of kind of female coaches and support staff, I would say, which I guess is quite common in a lot of sports. And like I've recently started training with Mel Marshall, who's one of the best coaches sort of in GB or in the world, and she's kind of leading the way for female coaches, which is really great to kind of train with her, and as she's trying to like get more people involved with coaching, because when you like at Worlds, you can just look around poolside and 90% of the coaches are male, and she always points that out, and she's like, trying to increase the amount of female coaches, I guess. So I think in that respect, there's probably quite a big gap between male and female in terms of being able, I don't know how easy it is to get kind of jobs in swimming, being male or versus being female, but there's definitely kind of issues there, I think.
Yeah, and is that then, by all means, not looking to wish your career away because you're so young still, but is that something that you potentially would look at when you're older as well? Or do you feel as though once you've sort of done your time in swimming with competing and whatnot, that you would look to go down a different avenue?
Yeah, I've never really sort of wanted to be a swimming coach. I think I've never seen myself as being like a majorly authoritative person, and so I've never really thought that I would be a really good coach. So I guess it's just not because I'm put off because I'm female, but just because I just don't think it's necessarily in my nature. But yeah, I think I would go back to kind of my degrees and look at kind of where I want to go down, potentially something in public health, but obviously that's kind of on hold for a little bit, so I'm trying not to think too far ahead about that yet.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously with yourself, because you started so young, but having that break between obviously the age of 13 and going to university, what sort of advice would you give to a woman that was considering sort of pursuing a career in swimming or looking at it maybe not as seriously as that, but they sort of have stopped like you did? What sort of advice would you give them?
I think that generally, probably across lots of different sports, I think there just needs to be a bit more like understanding of young athletes, or female or male, just like what the demands are for them, whether it's like in their education or they want to do other sports, or they need a better balance in terms of social education and sport. I think like what I found in swimming is it's very kind of like you just kind of focused on the swimming aspect of the swimmer, and actually there's so many other aspects in their life that definitely needs to improve quite a lot. And I think there's so much focus on you need to be amazing at age 12 or 13, when actually you're probably not going to make your first international team till you're sort of 17, 18. And so to sustain that level of intensity from like 13 to 17 is very, very difficult. And it's probably why a lot of people do drop out of sports kind of in that 14, 15 age range. So I think there's just a bit more support around general life balance. Potentially more people would stick around in sports and potentially get to a high level when they're a bit older.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we love working with you, and obviously what you represent, and I think giving everyone an insight into how it's been for you so far, and like I said, you're at such a young age that you've got your whole career pretty much ahead of you, and what a sort of fantastic opportunity it is with the Olympics this year. So I personally want to say thank you for giving us all a little bit more of an insight into your life, but also obviously swimming, because like I say, it's, I think, quite a unique sport for a lot of people, and certainly one that we would like to give people more exposure to, because the time constraints that you mentioned then, and the mental and physical demands that you put on yourself is certainly applaudable for anyone that sort of didn't necessarily understand what all of the background training and everything else that comes with it. So thank you very much for obviously coming on. I know obviously you're competing soon, so we obviously wish you all the best of luck in that, and we'll be continuously working to get you to the Olympics and making that a reality. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks.
No worries.